Pedro's Journal by Pam Conrad. August 3rd. The ship's roster of the Santa Maria has me down as Pedro de Salcedo, ship's boy, and the captain of the ship, who calls himself Captain General of the Ocean Sea, has hired me not for my great love of the sea, nor for my seamanship, but because I have been taught to read and write, and he thinks it will be useful to have me along. Last night, when I boarded the Santa Maria with 40 others and made ready to begin this uncertain journey to India, I saw my mother standing alone on the dock wrapped in her black shawl. She lifted her hand to wave, and I turned away quickly. I have never been away from our home. I have never been on a ship as great as this one. I dedicate this journal, this parcel of letters and drawings, to my dear mother, who has lost so much, and who I pray will not lose me as well. Her young boy, whom she calls Pedro de mi corazón, Pedro of my heart. We are a fleet of 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta with us, and this morning into the darkness, with no one watching or waving goodbye, we left the harbor at Palos and headed out for the sandbar on the Saltes River. There we waited for the tide and wind and then made our way for the Canary Islands. We are to be the first ships ever to run a course west to the Indies. Marco Polo's land, where palaces are built of gold, where mandarins wear silk brocade, and pearls are the size of ripened grapes. A couple of the men are seasick and are already mumbling that we will never see this India our captain is so certain we will find. Me? I have no knowledge of maps or charts or distant journeys. I am only a ship's boy. There are 3 of us, and I am beginning to suspect that we will do all the work no one wants to do. But already the captain favors me and has called upon me to write and to copy certain of his writings. I believe he is testing me and will find I am capable and write a good hand. The captain told me that he was pleased to see my stomach is as strong as my handwriting, and has encouraged me to sketch some of the things I see around me. Perhaps I am a natural seaman, although I admit that looking over the side of this creaking ship into the swelling water can fill me with terror. September 10th. Everyone seemed crazy all day. No one is doing his job well. Even the helmsman steered improperly and took us north instead of west. I thought the captain would string up the whole crew to the mast. "What do you think you are doing?" he shouted. "Steering a ferryboat across the river of Seville?" I've seen him go into white rages and then pace his cabin saying his Hail Marys. We finally lost sight of land and we sailed west. Some say it will be a long time before we see it again, if at all. A couple of the men were crying, and the captain shamed them and then promised them all sorts of riches and fame. He has said that the first man to spot land will receive a reward of 10,000 maravedis. The men listen to him sullenly, and I see them exchange glances. They don't believe him, and after what I saw this morning, I wonder if they should. I noted that the morning slate said we made 180 miles, and yet the captain recorded only 144 in his official log. That the men see. I believe he is trying to make the crew believe that we are closer to home than is true. But 10,000 maravedis! Think of all I could buy for my mother. Even now I could picture a beautiful dress, a rich dress that she could wear to Mass at Easter. I will keep a sharp eye. I will be the first to spot land. October 10th. This has been the worst day of all for the captain. I am certain of this. We have doubled all previous records of days and leagues at sea, and we've gone way past the point where he originally said we would find land. There is nothing out here. Surely we are lost, and everyone is certain now as well. This morning the men responded slowly to orders, scowling and slamming down their tools and lines. They whispered in pairs and small groups on deck and below. The air was thick with mutiny and betrayal, until finally everything came to a dead stop. The wind howled through the shrouds, and the men just stood there on deck and did not move aside when Columbus came. "Enough!" one of the men said to his face. "This is enough! Now we turn back!" The other men grumbled in their assent and nodded, their fists clenched, their chests broad, and they remained motionless and unmoved while Columbus paced the deck, telling them how close he figured we must be, and that land could be right over the next horizon. He told them again of the fame and fortune that would be theirs if they could last only a little longer. And they laughed at him, their cruel laughter of impatient and defeated men. All that aside, he added, with the fresh easterly wind coming at us and the rising sea, we can't turn a course back to Spain right now. We would stand still in the water. I looked up at the sails, full and straining, taking us farther and farther from Spain. What if a westerly wind never came? What if we just blown away for ever and ever? "Let me offer you this," Columbus finally said. "Do me this favor. Stay with me this day and night, and if I don't bring you to land before day, cut off my head, and you shall return." The men glanced at each other. Some nodded. "One day," they said. "One day, and then we turn around." "That is all I ask," Columbus said. Later, when I went down to the cabin with the log, the captain's door was bolted shut, and when I knocked he didn't answer. So I sat outside the door with the heavy journal in my lap and waited. October 11th. Through the day was to have been our last day traveling westward. Many things were seen floating in the water, things that stirred everyone's hopes and had the men once again scanning the horizon. We saw birds in flocks, reeds and plants floating in the water, and a small floating board, and even a stick was recovered that had iron workings on it, obviously man-made. Suddenly no one wished to turn around. There was no further word on it. At sunset, I led the prayers and the men sang the Salve Regina. Then the captain spoke and the seamen on the stern castle, doubling the night watch and urging everyone to keep a sharp lookout. No one asked about turning back. Then the captain added a new bonus to his reward of 10,000 maravedis. He added a silk doublet, and some of the men joked with each other. Next, the captain nodded to me, and I sang for the changing of the watch. But my words were lost in the wind that was growing brisker, and in the seas that were growing heavier, and sounding like breakers all about us. The men dispersed to their watches and their bunks, and the captain paced the deck. I don't know why, but this night I stayed with him. I stayed still by the gunwale, watching over the side. Once in a while he would stand beside me, silent, looking westward, always westward. Then, an hour before moonrise, the captain froze beside me. "Gutierrez!" he called to one of the king's men on board who came running. He pointed out across the river. "What do you see?" Gutierrez peered into the west. "I don't see anything," he said. What do you see?" "Can't you see it?" the captain whispered. "The light, like a little wax candle rising and falling." The man at his side was quiet. I was there beside him too, straining my own eyes to the dark horizon. Suddenly, another seaman called out across the darkness, "Land! Land!" "He's already seen it," I shouted. "My master's already seen it." And the captain laughed and tousled my hair. "Tierra! Tierra!" It was heard all across the water from all three ships. I am below now in the captain's cabin writing, while in the light of the rising moon, with our sails silver in the moonlight, where we three exploring ships are rolling and plunging through the swells toward land. Tomorrow our feet will touch soil, and I can assure my dear mother in the hills of Spain that no one will get much sleep on board the Santa Maria tonight. October 12th. A lush green island was there in the morning, and our three ships approached it carefully, maneuvering through the breakers and threatening Barrier Reef. We could see clear down to the reef in the sparkling blue waters as we sailed through. And it is truly land, truly earth, here, so far from Spain. The Santa Maria led the way into the sheltered bay of the island and got a mark of only 5 fathoms depth. We anchored there and were barely paused to admire the breathtaking beauty. Small boats were prepared, armed, and lowered, and in these some of us went ashore. Out of respect, all waited while Christopher Columbus leaped out of the boat, his feet the first to touch this new land. I wonder what my mother would say if she knew that her son had lost the 10,000 maravedis to the captain who claimed it for himself. The captain carried the royal banner for our king and queen, and as everyone else scrambled out of the boats and secured them in the white sand, he thrust the banner into the earth, and then sank down to his knees and said a prayer of thanksgiving for our safe arrival in India. Others dropped to their knees around him. Diego was beside me, and he clapped his hand on my shoulder. I knew he was happy to be on land again. I was, too, although I have been at sea so long that even on land the ground seems to buckle and sway beneath my feet. The captain made a solemn ceremony and then formally took possession of the land for the king and queen, naming it San Salvador. We all witnessed this, and then little by little we noticed something else. There were people stepping out from the trees. Beautiful, strong, naked people with tanned skin and straight black hair. My mother would have lowered her eyes or looked away, as I have seen her do in our home when someone dresses, but I could not take my eyes off them. Some had boldly painted their bodies or their faces, some only their eyes, some their noses. They were so beautiful and gentle. They walked towards us slowly, but without fear, smiling and reaching out their hands. The sailors watched them in wonder, and when these people came near, the crew gave them coins, little red caps, whatever they had in their pockets. Columbus himself showed one native his sword, and the native, never having seen such an instrument before, slid his fingers along the sharp edge, and looked startled at his fingers that dripped blood into the sand. Everyone was smiling and so friendly. Close up we could see how clear and gentle their eyes were, how broad and unusual their foreheads. The captain especially noted and said to one of his men, "See the gold in that one's nose? See how docile they are? They will be easy. We will take 6 back with us to Spain." I think at this, too, my mother would have lowered her eyes. October 16th. So much has happened. There is so much to remember and record, and so much I do not think I want to tell my mother. Perhaps I will keep these letters to myself after all. The natives think that we are angels from God. They swim out to us, wave, throw themselves in the sand, hold their hands and faces to the sky, and sing and call to us. The crew loves it, and no one loves it better than Columbus. He lifts his open palms to them like a priest at Mass. I sometimes wonder if he doesn't believe these natives himself just a little bit. They come right out of the ship in swift dugouts that they sit 40 men, and sometimes as they approach us at the dugout tips, but in minutes they right it and begin bailing it out with hollow gourds. All day long Indians row out to see us, bringing gifts of cotton thread, shell-tipped spears, and even brightly colored parrots that sit on our shoulders and cry out in human voices. For their trouble we give them more worthless beads, bells, and tastes of honey, which they marvel at. The 6 native men Columbus has taken aboard are not very happy. One by one they are escaping, which I cannot help but say I am happy for. One jumped overboard and swam away, and another jumped overboard when a dugout came up alongside us in the darkness. Some of the crew seized another man coming alongside in a dugout and forced him on board. Columbus tried to convince him of our good intentions through sign language and broken words, and more gifts of glass beads and junk, and the man rowed back to some people on the shore. They stood talking to each other and pointing at our ship. Columbus smiled and was convinced they know we are from God. Me? I am not so sure they will believe it for much longer.